I'm going to talk about how I go about finding the perfect arrow weight for me. I'm going to go through it. I'm going to give you links down in the description. They're going to take you to all the resources I'm talking about so you don't have to do any math, right? All you got to do is plug and play, plug your stuff in, and you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about here, and you'll be able to figure out the perfect arrow weight for you fast and easy. I guarantee it. Now bear with me, there's a bunch of stuff to go over here. So first off, my name is Mike Manley. I am a retired U.S. Army Green Beret. I was in Special Forces for quite a number of years. I understand ballistics, and I think what's being lost in a lot of the different things out there to talk about arrow setups is people are not talking about the fact that arrow weight, optimally, what is the maximum effective arrow for you? What is that? It's going to be different for all of us, right? It's not going to be the same, and here's the reason why. Your bow's different than your buddy's. Your draw weight's different than your buddy's. Your draw length is different, right? Now, there's a few of you out there that are the same, right? But most of us all have different setups. I have a very different bow. We have a very different draw weight. We have a very different draw length. I'll use me for example, right? All through this video, I'm going to talk about me and my current setup as an example. I have a Matthews lift. I just bought this year, brand new bow. The IBO speed on that bow is the factory, IBO speed is 348 feet per second, right? That is an estimate. We know all the time these things sometimes are faster, sometimes are slower. So everything I'm going to talk about here is an estimate, but it's going to get you within that 10 to 20 grain range of accuracy, right? We don't have a chronograph. We can't sit here and build out 50 arrows and see which one works the best and shoot it through a chronograph and say, oh, this is the best one. It's awesome. We can't do that, right? Some of you can, but most of us can't. We can't afford that. But what I'm going to take you through is going to allow you to see exactly what you need to do. It's not complicated. It's actually very easy. Now, before I go through the process, I'm going to give you two ranging examples. As I already talked about this in my other video, if you haven't watched the video, why arrow weight is important, go back and watch it, and you'll see a lot of whys, the whys that I'm talking about here, and why we want to have the most effective arrow we can. To me, it's like maximizing everything else. So you're looking at your broadhead, you want to have the best broadhead possible, you want to have high FOC in your arrow, you want to be able to have that 13 to 15% or even higher. So anyway, let's talk about a low arrow weight and a higher arrow weight, and then we're going to talk about how you can figure out the perfect arrow weight for you. So with my current setup, as I said, I have a Matthews lift. It shoots a 348 feet per second at IBO speed. That's the factory, what they're saying, right? So we know that's kind of a ballpark. And then I'm shooting a 26.5-inch draw length. I am not a big guy. I'm 5'8", 190 pounds. And then my draw weight is 65 pounds. So it's kind of an average setup, right? I'm not doing anything crazy. I got a good bow, I got a decent draw weight, and I got a kind of crappy draw length, right? So at a 350 grain arrow through that setup, I'm shooting fast, of course, 298 feet per second. Now, when we move into the kinetic energy, I'm doing well there too, 69 foot-pounds, right? I talked about the minimums required, 25 to 41 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. Right, so it's way over that. We're way good on kinetic energy, but what we're not way good on is mass, right? You talk about shooting a 22 through a 30-06, you can't do it. So if your bow is your prize 30-06 rifle, why are you trying to shoot a 22 through it, right? Shoot 30-06 through it with the perfect grains, that perfect grain bullet that's going to max out, right? That's what we're trying to do here. Now, the slug FPS on this is 0.463. So if you watch this in the last video, bear with me, we'll get through this quick. Now, on a higher end, 605 grain arrow for me, and actually I'm holding it in my hands, and 605 grain arrow, we're talking about 213 feet per second. That thing really slowed up. So you can see the opposite end of the spectrum for me. Somebody who has a 30-inch draw length, shooting 70, 80 pounds out of a bow with the same bow I have, they probably shoot a 650 grain arrow without blinking and have it do great for them, but much higher speed. But because of my setup, that's not a great arrow for me, right? The trajectory on it is horrible. The kinetic energy is still great though, 60.94 foot-pounds, so over 60, right? Who said the minimum, down the highest end of the minimum is 41. So I'm 20 foot-pounds of kinetic energy over that. And then the big difference is that 350 grain arrow was 0.463 slug feet per second. Whereas the 605 grain arrow, even though it's heavier, even though it's way slower, is 0.572 slug FPS, right? So much more momentum. That thing's still carrying a tremendous amount of momentum. Now, if I'm hunting 20 yards or less and don't worry about any drop, I'm just keeping close in, that arrow is deadly for me. Deadly. But to optimize and look at what I can do to optimize my setup, I go through all the things that I have and look at different arrow weights to see what's perfect for me. So let's talk about the process. Now, down in the description, I have links to all this. So on the screen here, you can see I have a calculator. This calculator calculates speed, kinetic energy, and momentum. All the things we just talked about. All you have to do is go in there and plug in your bow's IBO speed. If you don't know your bow's IBO speed, look it up on the web, go to the manufacturer, see what that bow's IBO speed is, factory speed on that bow. Then plug in your draw weight, your draw length, and any extra stuff you have in your bow. Now I put in there as kind of default with your peep and other stuff. I put in the default for extra stuff on your bowstring as 20 grains. I actually think I have like 20.5 grains on there, right? That's factoring in stuff on your bowstring. It makes a little bit of a difference for what you get on this. So if you have stuff on your bowstring, just go with that default. And then when you put all that information in, now go down to where it says arrow weight, right? Plug in a low arrow weight for your setup, right? And then incrementally increase it. And you're going to see, as you increase that arrow weight, you're going to see a place where it kind of tops out on kinetic energy and the kinetic energy starts to drop, right? And you keep inputting, that kinetic energy is going to drop a little bit. But what you're going to also see in the same realm is you're going to see the momentum in there increasing, right? So you're going to have a place where where you can split the difference on both and find an arrow weight, a median arrow weight, and kind of an average, if you will, a median arrow weight that is optimal for your current setup, right? For me, it's probably in the 490 grain range, kind of that median weight. And the arrows I'm shooting this year are at 505 grains, and I have another one at 530 grains, right? For me, for example, for those setups, my 505 grain arrow is shooting 246 feet per second, estimated, of course, 67.88 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. That's great. That's great, right? And the momentum is 0.552. So when I talked about the 0.572 feet per second for that arrow that, I had 605 grains, that was much higher, right? But when you're talking about the 350 grain arrow, that was 0.463, that didn't have it. The mass of the arrow and the penetration capability of your arrow really matters, right? So you're looking at that, you find that difference, you can split that difference, right? You can set up you can see on the website, I have kind of a chart there that I input a bunch of different weights for a sample scenario of a different bow setup and different arrows, right? And that setup, I think I had a 335 IBO speed bow with a 27-inch draw length, which I had that bow set at. And I think I put in initially a 423 grain arrow. Just like I have on the screen here, the different things you're going to see as far as what that arrow weight does and how it affects speed. Obviously, it's always going to lower your speed, but the momentum of the arrow continues to increase, but there's diminishing returns, right? You hit a point where that starts dropping and your kinetic energy really starts to drop, right? And that's where you get those, big, trajectory in your arrow where you really have to aim high to hit something close. You don't want that. So now what we're talking about is, now you're talking about how do you get the perfect arrow weight for your hunting application, right? You look at the application that you want to hunt at, you say, all my stuff is 30 yards or closer. I'm not shooting a deer farther than 30 yards away. Well, you can go heavy, right? you can go on the heavy end of your personal spectrum. Now, if you are shooting out more distance, you might want to lighten it up a bit, right? And even, especially when you are hunting distance, you might want to build some test arrows or have some test arrows made and go out and shoot them and see the differences between two, go out and see if you can go to an archery shop where you can have 1 or 2 arrows built individually and see if you can do that just to test the weights. They don't have to be the best arrows in the world, but you can see the trajectory on them and get a good idea of how those arrows fly for you. Because for me, that's extremely important. You don't want a deer to jump the string on you. So when you are setting up your arrows and you're saying, oh, I really like shooting the light arrows because they really fly fast and straight for me. Think again. Think about the basic physics and ballistics of an arrow is no different than a bullet. You have the right mass and the right grains coupled with the right broadhead, right? A great broadhead. I prefer fixed blade broadheads for this application. And then you have one heck of an arrow. So don't sell yourself short. Don't build arrows that don't maximize the effectiveness of your current setup and how you want to hunt. Maximize them. Use this formula. Go to the website, take it through, and I promise you that once you test this out, you are going to be happy. I recommend starting with that medium weight first. See how it works out for you. Don't go crazy on it, right? If you are worried about trajectory or worried about going too far, find that median for you. Test that arrow out, especially if you are using really light arrows right now. Test it out. See how it works. I promise you, you will have a more lethal arrow and you have better results in the field, right? But it still comes down to shot placement, right? If you're not making the right shot, all bets are off. But having an arrow that maximizes your chances is something we all want, right? So this is how I do it. I hope you liked the video. If you did like the video, hit the like button. Please subscribe, and I will see you next time.